Platemark is a podcast about prints and the printmaking ecosystem with me, Anne Schaefer. I'm an independent curator, and I specialize in prints and printmaking. Now we're talking about fine art limited edition prints generally, lithographs, screen prints, woodcuts, etchings, engravings, you name it. Within the umbrella of Platemark, we are running a couple of different series. There's an ongoing series of interviews with people who occupy various roles in the ecosystem, like curators and artists and printers and gallerists. But this is series 2, A History of Prints. In this episode, Tru, Ludwig, and I take a long lead into the subject of the Enlightenment in the 18th century. It is a time of great learning and a lot of bad other stuff. It's a long episode, and there's a part 2 to it. After that, we'll move on to Goya, Hogarth, and then get to Turner and start moving into modernism. I hope you are enjoying the history of prints. I think it's a vital part of our work, sharing the story of prints and how they have been at the crux of our history from the beginning. I feel really passionate about prints. I feel passionate about our shared visual culture and how important it is for all of us to understand how information got circulated way back in the day and how it continues to get circulated on that lovely thing called the internet. It's all part of the same thing, part of the same idea. The early printed image was that era's internet. They're also really cool. So I'm always, shouting from the rooftop. I call myself a print evangelist, and I just believe wholeheartedly that it's the corner of the art world that needs to have a little bit more sunlight shone upon it. So the images that Tru and I talk about will be over in the show notes at platemarkpodcast.com. You know that. I hope you enjoy it. Here we go. Tru and I are going to proceed in the chronology, and we're going to introduce the concept of the Enlightenment.
And its legacy.
And so we're moving on from, I guess, Baroque.
Yeah, we've been doing Baroque stuff, and we'd kind of enjoyed that. And we talked about Peter Paul Rubens. We talked about RVR a little bit. Apparently, Anne looks wildly surprised that she looked at me at this end of the 3rd episode of Rembrandt and said, "Do you realize you've talked about Rembrandt for 4 hours?" And I said, "No." No.
Okay.
So the Enlightenment, its legacy, for good or ill. Didn't you want to say anything about you and where we are?
This is where we all do our positionalities. Everyone, if it makes you cringe, just fast forward. But we're doing it because
I'm supine.
It's important. I identify as a cishet white woman, and I use the pronouns she, her.
I identify as a gay white trans man, and I use the pronouns he, him. When I was taking art history, it seemed like we just leapfrogged over the 18th century because all the cool stuff was happening in the Baroque era. You got breasticles and testicles, which I can say in this venue, but if I said that in my college, people would be wildly upset. But that's what the Baroque was about. It was a celebration of the human figure and all the twisting and the turning.
Wait, we went straight to
19th century because it was awesome. And maybe I think Greuze got snuck in there, who was some sort of, moral genre kind of guy. But the way I remember it was that neoclassicism occurs first and that romanticism was a reaction to that. And so it was like for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. But if we start dialing it back the way we study things now, they kind of emerge from the same set of stimuli, but romanticism really picks up speed about 1830. Neoclassicism becomes the thing. It's the art of the revolution in the 1780s in France, and may as well have been in England. And it chugs along and it never goes away. Ever, because the Academy approves of it. It's neoclassicism, it's the art of the Greeks, it's the bright and shiny ideas of the great intellects. But it really is interesting to start understanding that these things come out of the 18th century. And the more we look at those things, the more interesting they become. So the first time I really, really tackled the 18th century, I think the summer of 2011, I was teaching art history in a summer version for Micah's continuing studies. And it was a lot of fun because we met maybe 3 or 4 days a week. So there was like, bop, 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 bop. So you didn't have to remind him like, last week we were discussing X, Y, and Z. And so things could build kind of like a symphony, like, and it was really neat because when I started talking about some of the methods and some of the kinds of thinking that emerged in the Enlightenment, it was amazing. And I remember looking at this person in the front row and like, this is blowing my mind, man. That really happened? I'm like, yeah, it did. Because how did you go from the Baroque to all of a sudden neoclassicism?
I agree.
Well, it's the Enlightenment. But the Enlightenment is a lovely thing. And as we'll see, it's a lovely thing for white people and the people in power, just as in the victors write the history. But the Enlightenment as we know it and we think about it today, I think we have to remember that you can't always cancel things that annoy you or displease you or shock you or do not apply to standards of thinking today because they were still the foundational aspects of what we are now. You can't just say, yeah, of course, Thomas Jefferson was the great white guy that was the third president and did all this great stuff. But in the 20 years that I've been going to Monticello, all of a sudden, Sally Hemings is a real human being who had a family and had a role and had children. And they now have the quarters of the people that served Thomas Jefferson there. But once upon a time, none of that was a facet. It doesn't discount the fact that Thomas Jefferson was an incredibly well-educated person that made some amazing strides that if he hadn't done it, who would have and what would have happened?
I can't quibble with the idea of knowing more, but there were things that came along with that grabbing of knowledge and True's cueing me. I have come to call it the Endarkenment.
Please do.
Well, and not in terms of skin tone.
No.
In terms of thinking that's one-sided or thinking that's self-serving or thinking that's I'm going to do this thing and automatically the thing that you're studying becomes the other. Like there's this, it's the othering of things, I think, which is really problematic now.
I think what I'm going to try to present today are some facts and things that were published during the Enlightenment, the 18th century, and some of this will still be delivered with the dewy-eyed amazement of a kid from Iowa who went, wow, what an amazing intellectual leap that was. Just what made it possible for people to suddenly relinquish hundreds of years of superstition or being threatened with excommunication because they needed to see what was lying underneath the surface of the skin of the human body. But then we could also take that same querying and wonder, when we do that, as we look at life, air quotes, with great equality, even amongst the sexes, male and female, we'll even see that the othering of the female in the Enlightenment was also a problem. This has been a peculiar little road for me. I just say, hey, it's going to be the Enlightenment. These are cool things we want to talk about that were published because they're amazing objects, documents, records. They also have their problems, just like any of us.
Sure.
So there's that.
All right.
Did you want to say anything else? Because in this preparation for thinking about what we were going to talk about, I had come across this, how the Enlightenment created modern race thinking and why we should confront it. Well, yeah, it really did. Now, as an art historian, I can tell you that I am not digging into the depths of all of this, nor am I well read on, Rousseau or Diderot or any of those great scholars, but I know that they still gave us sound bites that we still use. With that said, in much the same way, realizing that new discoveries are made all the time. For instance, in the same file that I was keeping, How the Enlightenment Created Modern Race Thinking and Why We Should Confront It, I come across my email from the president of Johns Hopkins University about the find that they had made in about the 2020 of the fact that Johns Hopkins, Quaker, established the school, was an abolitionist, actually had in fact owned or had enslaved people working for him for a while. And that sets the school on its ass. And it means, let's backpedal and figure out what the truth is. And we have to backpedal further. So I teach at Peabody. So I have the email from the director of the Peabody Conservatory of Music that was donated by George Peabody, the Scotsman. Now we have to backpedal to that and say, now, did he have any skeletons in his closet that we don't know about? Why would the Scotsman say to Baltimore, here, have a library, here, have a concert series, here, have an entire conservatory of music, here, have a lecture series? Was there something wrong with him? Well, that laundry may yet be aired, and maybe we should be looking for it. I think in the culture we live in now, there's so much laundry that has been aired and nothing has been done about it. If we think about the current political climate, it's worrisome to me that we're willing to cancel people who did buck the system, start a new trend, try to make a contribution for the betterment of the human race or the knowledge of who we are as humans, yet we still allow people who are absolutely morally bankrupt and run for public office.
Right.
It's the same thought.
Yeah.
Before we cancel me, let's just move on.
We're not canceling you, Tru.
No, but the thing is, we got to think about this stuff. And I don't have the bandwidth to really devote to it that I wish I could. And if I did, I think I'd be a very depressed person. But
I do think as presenters of history and story that we are called to talk about it all, and we're called to not shy away from the darkness. And,
absolutely.
You please don't think that we are casting our opinions on one side or the other, although you can probably tell where we lean. I mean, we are trying to deliver history to you.
When we talk about history of prints, we oftentimes, Ann and I, get real stoked about single sheet handheld things, and we pulled all this stuff out in front of students. But we're going to kind of embark on a moment here where some of the really exciting stuff, this always makes Ann's face get a little crinkly. When I take them to the Peabody Library, the George Peabody Library, same George Peabody, the Scotsman who donated this library that has everything from, Aardvark to Zanzibar.
In the most beautiful building ever.
Oh, God, the seventh story.
I'll post a picture. It's gorgeous.
Oh, Lordy. It's just 10 feet shy of the height of the Sistine ceiling.
Oh, my gosh.
When you walk in there. And it take students there on a field trip. It's made of this new amazing fireproof stuff called cast iron. And it's really designed in the neo-whatsoever style because it was built in 1878. So it's like, it's got Greek keys and it's got Roman arches. Cool. And it's freaking glorious. It has a skylight so you can sit at these magnificent tables, and they'll bring you these glorious books that go all the way back. I've shown my students the Nuremberg Chronicle in that space. I showed them the Vesalius on the fabric of the human body in that space. The Peabody Library is this glorious, glorious space that any human being could go visit. Well, if you're super special, you get to go to the second floor into the room, the Sanctum Sanctorum, that has a lot of
rare book room.
Right. And in that room are things like Diderot's Encyclopédie, which I'll be talking about a little bit. I held the first edition of Darwin, Origin of the Species.
What?
I've held the first edition of Leaves of Grass that was typeset by Whitman himself.
Wow.
But the idea of this space where people could come and learn these great things, well, we're talking about those kinds of publications today because books are also an incredible, beautiful source of
knowledge
and
facts
and
prints.
There you go. Because it's not all text. It's also text and
images.
Yeah, and how are those images reproduced?
By print.
Yes, indeed. And they're not all woodcuts. A lot of them are in intaglio and engravings. And that's what we're really talking about today, are these books that, well, you'll see. So, the Endarkenment, the Enlightenment was the best of times. It was the worst of times.
So everybody should know that this is less about specific artists and specific pinnacles of the history of prints and more about setting the stage for the next several episodes.
At the same time, it's also about deciding what is worthy of reproduction, how much time and effort to be expended on it, who is the audience,
who could access it,
yeah, how it's going to be received, and in a couple of ways. Oh, Ann, this episode's going to go on a long time if we actually talk about stuff. This is going to...
There's a lot to unpack here, is what Tru's saying.
This has been a really wonderful and troubling preparation.
I think you said that about reproduction.
Oh, yeah, of course.
Didn't you? Yeah, that was a tough one, too.
This is rougher.
Yeah, I think this
way
is rougher.
Because truth hurts.
This one is it's about all of society.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And even as though these things are marvelous and wonderful forward strides, it's at the cost of something, you know?
Right.
When you have to win that hill, somebody's going to die. Somebody's going to have to be sacrificed. With that said, we all know that as Americans, monarchy can be a problem.
Where is Kate Middleton?
Oh, poor thing.
What the man?
Dude, that's so mean to them.
I don't understand.
Here's this poor person who's just trying to be decent. She's gone through this. She's a beautiful woman. You know, it's like, leave the woman alone. I mean, okay, so with that said, that impugns the sanctity, the truth of the royal family. Same deal here. You know, here we have, what am I showing you, Anne? I'm showing you the exit from where we have been into where we're headed. What do you see?
Right, so we have come out of the Baroque period into the 1700s.
Right.
But we're rapidly turning from Louis XIV,
Nice.
the Sun King, and Claude Lorrain to the academies. Oh, it's the academies time.
Yeah.
This changes everything because
Doesn't it,
remember
though?
what Carol Wax said about the whole system of how you became an artist shifted from a 7-year apprenticeship with some master to a school.
Absolutely.
So the whole thing is turned on its head.
Absolutely. Because who's in power? All right, here's the deal. So good old Louis XIV, Louis XIV in my notes, Louis XIV, who is being shown here in his
Rigaud,
the 1709 portrait of him, where he looks like Liberace. I also have a shot of Versailles from the air, and you can see the immensity of it. And a very important image by Poussin.
Poussin?
It's at Arcadia Ego,
right.
which is so important. It's so very classic.
So very dull. Did you hear that, everybody? So very dull.
Well, it's very good.
It's very
it's high quality.
boring.
Yes, because, well, there's no flaming thigh sweats. That comes with Romanticism. Poussin was one who sets the stage. This concept of what is classicism comes out of that belief in the 1700s and well into the 1800s because Poussin was so busy showing how important Greek and Rome was. But by the time we get into the center of the 18th century, into the 1700s, the absolute rapture over everything Greek and ultimately things Roman gives us the neoclassical style. But, you know, the French Academy, the Académie des Beaux-Arts, was established in 1648. Well, at that moment, Louis was 5 years old.
Oh, right.
His mother, Marie de Medici, was the regent. She was kind of filling the space while Louis becomes of age. But it was the French Academy of Fine Art, or the Académie des Beaux-Arts, the Academy of Painting and Sculpture, and maybe Architecture, was established in 1648 and then reestablished and really got its poop in a group. I don't suppose that's an elegant way of putting it, in 1663. And it was really starting to be run very systematically. And so what I'm showing...
Does Louis, like, swoop in and say, we will do this thing? How involved is he?
He's involved. Actually, what I'm showing you right there is a portrait bust of Louis XIV done by none other than Bernini, who he'd summoned away to come up and sculpt him, Louis.
It's the most crazy, wafty...
It's so Baroque. Isn't it glorious?
It's incredible.
And I'm so beautiful, and I have my big curly hair, and
It's the fabric, though, that gets me.
Of course, it's Italian Baroque brought to French. And of course, Bernini hated Paris.
Right.
And ran away. But what you're also seeing is the facade, the very classical facade of the first facade of the Louvre. You know, and what makes that seem classical, Miss Anne? What?
Well, I mean, there are columns all along the facade here, but in the middle, where the door presumably is basically a temple front.
Yep, it's the great, and you'll notice that even at the Baltimore Museum of Art, the temple front of any art institution, when they were being founded, you climb the temple of art
And knowledge.
And no, absolutely, and it's that whole system. And in a way, it's kind of wonderful to think that. In another way, well, the internet will prove everything wrong because it's now for everyone. But, you know, to be able to ascend the heights, to be able to become a member of this august academy was a big deal.
But all of these, I mean, I'm sure that these people, the Louis XIV people, wouldn't have been thinking about bringing in the lowest of the low
hell
to
no.
learn things. But now we can say that we have been encouraging everyone all along to ascend the mountain of knowledge, like the modern conception of...
Well, you mean the fact that education should be for everyone,
Right.
that American concept.
Right.
Yet we still can't provide decent education to people who live in inner cities, but you can send your kids to an expensive private school so they can get the Temple of Knowledge education to which we're all entitled. Problem, America, says the kid who went to a public school all the way through, growing up. And yet when I moved to Baltimore, because, and I apologize already for the governor of Iowa, but when I was growing up, Iowa, Minnesota, those states had some of the best educational systems in the country. And I didn't even know what a private school was because there wasn't a need for them except maybe the Catholic school for the Catholic kids, which of course I didn't understand because I grew up Protestant. But that's why the Catholic schools were for those religious groups.
Right. Different than prep school.
Right. But there was no such thing. Right. As far as I knew, I didn't know what a private school was till I moved to Baltimore. And
we have plenty of them.
And all of a sudden we were doing art. I was in Young Victorian Theater Company. And
were you now?
Oh, hell yeah. Sorry. Yes, it's obvious. I was in the Mikado. And, well, I was in a lot of Gilbert and Sullivan, but we weren't going to talk about that. That's another chapter.
Oh, we got to do Gilbert and Sullivan.
Oh, God. Let me tell you.
Let me tell you.
Oh, Ruttigore, Mikado, Pirates of Penzance. I think
Pinafore.
I did Pinafore. Done at least 7 of them.
Oh, my gosh.
I know.
I've only done 2.
So we did our rehearsals for Young Vic at the Gilman School.
Did you?
Yeah.
That tiny little stage?
Yeah.
Wow.
And it was a private school, and I didn't know what that was. And some of the young Victorians that were in that company went through that school. And honest to God, Ann, that was the first time I had really understood what a private school was. And why do you need to do this? Why aren't you going? And then I discovered what the schools were like. Dan and Ballimer, hun.
Yeah.
And it was shocking to me because I thought that's not how the world worked. I thought everybody got...
Public schools are good everywhere.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Yeah.
Of course, I know...
They should be.
Well, of course
By
they...
definition, they should be.
Because it's America, right?
Yes.
And everyone should have the same rights.
That's correct.
Well, now we're going to go back to Louis XIV, and we're going to go back to the concept of the French Academy.
I find this Academy thing... I mean, I don't think I really ever thought about how big a deal
it's a juggernaut.
It's a game changer.
Oh yeah, and so when I show my students this, at first they're like, oh yeah, it looks like looks kind of like the U.S. Treasury building.
Yeah,
kind of looks maybe kind of like the front of the National Gallery of Art, or it might look kind of like, who knows, even the front of the U.S. Capitol. Because it's all very classical. French classicism starts really first, but
wait, isn't that? Oh, I mean, I guess it's derived out of Greek and Roman.
Greco-Roman, yeah.
Yeah.
What?
Well, no, I just don't think of it as French. I think it is deriving so farther south,
I know, and that's the thing. But see, the French, when we think about Poussin, think about Claude Lorraine and how they were doing all the Rome and the Italian, la la la.
They're the conduits.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Because they're the ones that were saying, oh, the Italian, that's beautiful, it's beautiful. And it's interesting when you think about how the stronghold on what the creative center was through the Renaissance. Think about when France really becomes a thing. It's Louis.
Only now.
Louis.
Have we seen any French artists until Claude and Poussin?
Exactly.
Right.
And what makes them great? They're looking back to the Italian, the Greek, the Greco-Roman tradition. Where are they getting it? Rome.
Do you think that they were sitting around a table with Louis XIV saying, if we bring back Greek and Rome in, style or whatever, its subject matter, this'll do it. We'll get on the map.
Kind of.
You think?
Hey, look at the U.S. Just wait till I show you what we do with our academies. We're all like, people. Hey, it's like, I can be just as good. See, I have an art academy too. This is amazing to me now. So what I'm going to say is that now it doesn't mean that there weren't academies cropping up.
Wait. So what's Germany and the lowlands? What are they all doing at this point?
Leiden, the universities. Well, you don't hear about an academy with the same.
You don't.
thunking heaviness of the French Academy of Painting and Sculpture.
Right, or England soon.
1768.
Yeah.
But you know, Bologna had one. All of these cities in Italy had academies, like the Carracci were in them down in Bologna, and there's an academy here or there. But it was really the French.
It's weird how it slingshots across the continent.
How do you prove how good you are? You show that you're as good as those boys that started the Renaissance. They had the academies.
They're all just peeing on everybody's tree?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, my heavens.
Absolutely. Because, really, you haven't heard... Let's think. The French you hear about this... Okay, folks, I apologize if this seems incredibly narrow-minded, but let's think about the French we've heard about. Louis Lenain, he did country scenes. Latour... Oh, my God, Georges de Latour.
We haven't talked about him at all.
We don't get to talk about him because he's such a succulent painter, but he's so scrumpy.
He is scrumpy.
But he's at the same time as Poussin, who's so effing important. And all these people, oh, it's Poussin, let's follow him. And it's Claude, who is so beautiful, but the only reason all of those glorious landscapes get any traction is because he peoples them with the Queen of Sheba, disembarking from her blah, blah, blah.
Right.
And gives it all those historic things, and then puts the classical pieces of architecture in there. And I know that people will prove me wrong, but I'm going to basically tell you that from my experience, it's still that being able to walk the walk and talk the talk of showing classical elements and being able to have people wear their togas and have the stories of St. John and the island of Patmos with something that looks sort of like the Pantheon behind him on a mythical island, writing his letters to the Corinthians. It is a way of validating. You know, okay, let's talk about all the poor people who buy shoes that are supposed to look like Louboutin
or whatever.
Right.
Oh, yes, right.
Oh, sorry.
Sneakers, sorry.
Okay.
Sneakers.
Air Jordans.
Right.
Or you know, what are those red-soled high pump?
The Louboutins.
Louboutins.
Yeah.
Like, I couldn't even think of that.
Yeah.
What do we do to try and prove that we're better than we are? We wear clothing. We wear things that... Cubic zirconia.
Sure.
Cubic zirconia.
Yeah.
Greek and Rome is the cubic zirconia.
Louis Vuitton bags.
Yes. Chanel. All of that stuff. It's that brand association. If you really think about it, it's you know, I can walk the walk, I can talk the talk, I can say the names, I can do the Greco-Roman. I must be smart and important.
But what's so fascinating is today in art, like not in social influencer things where you're trying to get the next sneaker or whatever, but in art today, everyone's grasping for the next thing, and nobody's looking backwards. And if you do, you're called
postmodern,
or you're called derivative or retardataire.
Or appropriating. Derivative is the worst.
It's the worst.
Or you could just simply say, nice frame.
Fascinating. Nice frame.
And then you could say, oh, but I'm a conceptual artist. There is no frame. In much the same way there is no spoon.
It's fascinating, though, that they're still looking backwards.
Of course they don't have any knowledge of how we think today. All of the 20th century was spent defying all of the stuff that we're going to talk about now.
Right.
Because the 20th century was given the keys to the car. And they went out and they drove the out of that car and they did whatever they wanted with it. Think about it. Mm-hmm. Think about, okay, Cubism.
Right, sure.
Dada. You f*** the world up now. We're going to be Dadists, and then it's going to decline, and then it's going to turn into Surrealism. Nothing matters. And then we go into abstract expressionism because it's all about expressionism. And then we'll go into color field, and then we'll go into pop because all of your expressive stuff was bullshit. And then we're going to win minimal because all of that stuff was way too expressive and doesn't mean anything, so it's just an object. And then it's going to turn into what comes after minimalism. Well, then that becomes postmodern because then it's all self-reflexive again.
It's all conceptual.
Yeah, and so it starts...
there's nothing left to do in terms of form. We've done it all.
In theory, yes.
In theory.
Yes. So as an artist working today, I can say, I am an analog human being. I can look at students do stuff digitally and they can do anything they want digitally, but I love to feel the scritchy scritch of my scribe on a copper plate or my pencil on a piece of paper. And yes, the human body really hasn't changed that much since we, basically crawled out of the mud. Excuse me, Scopes. But we haven't changed that much, but every person gets to be who they are, and you can represent the body any way you want. And And at the end of the day, do I have anything to contribute as an artist? Do I need to know all the hot that's going on right now today? In theory, as an art historian, I'm supposed to. But I'm not an art contemporain. I'm an art historian. I almost avoid talking about contemporary art because it's not tested yet. It's the cool new thing.
Sure.
But the cool new thing's going to be bullshit.
Doesn't have any legs, right?
What you're looking at right now is a painting by Johann Zoffany that I use in class every semester. And actually, there are three of them in here because he was a very important chronicler of what was going on in the British Academy of Fine Art. But essentially, to me, they're interchangeable.
They
are the same thing because the Brits...
Same idea.
Because, okay, so the French...
Even though they're at war all the time. It's hilarious.
I won't make the joke. The French Academy had been established in 1648 and re-established in 1663.
Yes.
But the English Academy hadn't become real until 1768.
It's 100 years later.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
But it's doing everything it can to match up as much as it can. It really, really is.
I wonder why the delay, A, and B...
Well, let's talk about how much English art you're looking at.
0.
And then you say, okay, Sir Christopher Wren, nice, thank you for that architecture. And then you go, oh, wait, along comes Hogarth, who we'll talk about in another episode. And that's in the 1730s, 40s.
18th century, okay.
And then you go, Grand Manner painting. Rayburn, Grand Manner painting.
West,
okay,
everybody, yeah.
All right, and then you might
Reynolds.
throw in Reynolds, Fuseli. Mm-hmm. But you don't really get excited, unless you're me. You don't really get excited about the Brits again until you're talking about Constable and Turner.
Right.
What are they painting? Not great portraits. They're painting landscapes.
That's a whole different thing.
That's a whole romantic thing.
Yes.
That's a whole turn.
It's a whole turn.
And Blake is entirely in his own little world, in the same bizarre little planet in a parallel universe as Goya.
Right.
Very good.
Well done.
Because they are antithetical.
Yes.
But they're both in their own marvelous planets, inventing their own marvelous things.
Okay.
So here we have this Zoffany, and I use this every semester because it tells you everything. This painting, and you'll sometimes see it referred to as the academicians of the Royal Academy. Sometimes you'll hear it the Life School of the Royal Academy. And it's an oil on canvas painting, and it was created by our Zoffany friend in 1771-72. But I'm going to bet you that almost all of those are actual portraits of the academicians.
So, for sure.
You know, in much the same way that Rembrandt had painted 130 years earlier, the Night Watch, this is a group portrait.
All recognizable people.
And I'm sure they are. Now,
well, aren't there, I'm sure there are maps of who they are.
Oh, I love those so much.
Sure they are.
Well, but let's think about that. Now, what am I comparing it to, actually?
School of Athens.
Correct. Now, this concept of these great minds all gathering together and having an opinion.
Right.
So what these boys are looking back to is
and they're all agreeing? It's hard to imagine, right?
They're all sitting in the same room with their goofy hats and their white leggings and their short pants and
wigs.
Exactly. So these boys are all here for a life drawing class, which actually, I adore this portrait because it tells you everything. Do you see any non-white people in this room?
No.
No. Do you see any nude people in this room?
Yes.
One.
Well, sort of. There's two models.
Well, all right. One is
getting dressed.
You're correct. Or maybe just
getting undressed.
Yeah, exactly. It's a marvelous panoply of all these academicians standing around. Somebody's giving a lesson in life drawing, and it tells you everything about how the academy is really based upon the concept of knowledge of the figure and the rules that are established here.
Okay, so we've got a lot of white men and two nude peoples, the models, whoever they are. Who knows who they are? Oh,
no clue, but he's a fine specimen.
He is a fine specimen.
And then there's another one down here in the corner who actually sort of is in the pose of the spinario. You know, there's a Greek sculpture of a guy who's pulling a thorn out of his foot.
Right.
That's actually the same kind of pose. I just realized that. But all of these academicians are standing around. Somebody's giving a lecture on life drawing. On the wall behind the models, there are two portraits of women who cannot be present because they cannot be in the presence of nude male bodies.
Even though they were founding
members of the Academy. One of them, who I will feature today, is Angelica Kaufmann. Yay, we love her. And the other one is who?
Somebody named Mary Moser.
Which, her shadow hasn't been cast as far. No. Nevertheless, she's in this, and she's present as an academician, which makes me happy that at least she got to show up.
They got a nod, at least, right?
At least. So what I try to establish with the students, particularly when I'm teaching this at Maryland Institute, or even to the Peabody Conservatory of Music students, because what they're attending is an academy, that it has the same rigor and the same staircasing, scaffolding of ideas as the Academy did, because there's an Academy of Music that they are the direct inheritors of at Peabody, was that in this painting, you can see on the back wall, there are several plaster casts that students would be required to do studies of, copies, in their sketchbooks, and you study those plaster casts of antiquity so that you absorb all of the great, noble lessons from those things. If you were to go to the Pennsylvania Academy of Fine Art right now in Philadelphia, they have a marvelous collection of plaster casts. If you go into the main building at Maryland Institute College of Art, we have a glorious selection of plaster casts of ancient Greek and Roman sculptures. You know where those used to be exhibited?
Where?
In what was called North Hall of the Peabody Conservatory of Music, because that was their art gallery.
Oh, interesting.
And now we at Maryland Institute College of Art have the plaster cast that used to be at the Peabody.
Oh, interesting.
Because our students couldn't use them more, so we persecute.
Small town.
We persecute them, I do, by making them go, okay, today we're going to go out and we're going to draw, oh God, we're going to have to draw sculptures. Yes. You are. But the idea of learning all the lessons you can from the casts of great, heroic, marvelous sculptures from the Greco-Roman tradition.
Where's the Laocoon?
Oh, don't worry. I actually give that as an extra. Never mind. I do give that.
That would be tough to draw.
I do. All right.
Crapola.
Of course, it's impossible. So when you think of, okay, that is the Laocoon and all those open spaces.
Right.
I use that to talk about the power of negative space, and I use Rubens' sketch of it, and I block it in, and I turn it upside down. I said, reproduce this sketch in your sketchbook. And what they have to figure out is, what are the shapes of the negative shapes that are created by the Laocoon? And then they try and draw those, and then I said, now when you're done with that, turn it right side up and see what you see.
Yeah.
And the fact is that if you get good at drawing the spaces around things, you'll be more accurate. Because the students that really pay attention to those shapes of those spaces and all of those open the elbows and the knee pits and all of those things.
Well, that's how you locate things in space.
Exactly.
Right.
So when you
That's a perfect triangle. That's how those things fit together.
Exactly.
Right.
So first you do all of the studying for the plaster. And remember, this is only a 7-year kind of time that you're going to spend in the academy.
Wait, is that right?
Oh yeah, the average.
It's a prescribed time of 7 years?
It was usually about 7 years.
It's just like
It is exactly like the apprentice system. But what they did was they consolidated all the power into one place.
Oh my God.
Yeah, it's a 7-year system.
It was a whole plan.
Yeah.
Who was in charge?
You mean kind of like just say no to drugs?
No.
Think about it. It's a structure that it can be.
But to what end? I was so fascinated.
Because it's called consolidating power.
Oh my head.
Because did Louis XIV know what visual art could do for his image? Do you think he saw himself in 3D, 2D,
but they're
4D?
Not all beholden to whoever King Henry. No,
yes, they are. You got it. To get into that, you have to kiss some proper butt.
Okay.
To get into that.
Right.
How many people are going to get into the Good Republicans Club? How many people are going to kiss the right ass to be able to be helping out the big guy? You know, friends of Carlotta, enemies of Carlotta. What is it going to be?
Yeesh.
All of the guys that got in there, none of those guys are like wild, crazy guys.
Nor are they possibly wildly talented.
No, that's not it. It's that they're not wildly willing to go so far out on a limb that they might break the limb and fall off. Except for Turner.
Yes.
who pissed everybody off. This is really
That's
cool. A lot of these guys are. Look how cool this is. Now you got to admit this is fun.
It is. The Zoffany is a great painting.
It is.
It's so instructive.
It's incredible. Everything about this is a lesson. So you're studying the plaster cast, you absorb their lessons, then you have to go through a number of required lectures on classical art theory. I was just quizzing a Peabody student. I think they have to have
Reynolds' lecture?
all of the theories of what art is, the golden mean, how do you do this, what's the scaffolding, how do you do a perspective, what are the proportions of the body, how do you shade, how do you do blah, blah.
So classes weren't structured like they are now. It was
go
draw, go to this lecture.
Oh, you know, I think we're so loosey-goosey now. I think this must have been... Listen, if Sir Joshua Reynolds was going to be given a lesson on XYZ, you and I both show up.
Yeah,
even though
true.
I think he's the biggest snooze on the face of the
I would
planet.
go listen to Reynolds.
Of course I would, because he knows a thing or two. You know why? He's an incredibly important painter. Why? Because he made himself important, because he painted all the most important people, because they wanted him, because he managed to climb through the ranks. He played the game.
Yes.
And he's... How many other of those portraits do we know? We know Reynolds. We know Sir Lawrence.
Yeah.
We know Rayburn. And then we know Gainsborough.
And then we know two Americans, West and Copley.
I know, isn't that awesome?
It's hilarious.
But the fact that West, the Quaker, went over there, and then he gives letters of introduction to Copley, who was a royalist, so he ran away a little bitch. You can't blame him.
He was a good painter.
Yeah, he was, but it was all just fine before he even left.
Yeah.
Because he was, prodigiously,
It's a soap opera, people.
It is, because Benjamin West was one of the founding members of the s2e30 Academy.
Yeah, and he was an American.
I know.
American.
Isn't that awesome? So, required lectures on classical art theory. At Peabody right now, I think you have to have 6 semesters of music theory. To me, that sounds nightmarish.
That sounds like a lot.
It's a lot, because you got to know how stuff fits together. Pick your thirds, your relative thirds, your minors, this is your
It's
circle.
not history. It's theory about
music.
how music goes together.
Yes.
Oh.
Sort of like grammar.
Yeah.
Well, see, but that's because we're of our area. Like, oh, snore.
I guess it's like life drawing.
Life drawing is glorious.
Okay.
Life drawing is glorious if you draw the same plat. At any rate, after you've done
I would be much more interested in drawing the nude figure than I would be in learning how thirds fit together.
However, okay.
Although I do enjoy music.
With what?
I do enjoy music.
Well, of course, you're allowed to enjoy music. You don't have to know, is that a Picardy third or was that a tritone?
Right. You don't have to know that. But you don't have to know that to look at
No, you don't.
pictures of...
But you realize that even at this time, as we're talking about the Academy, they already understood that most people are too stupid to understand what good art is. And as academicians, it was their job to teach people how to think and see and feel with their work.
But was there enough to really form a basis of judging for the common person?
All those white men say that there is.
Well, they're in a special club.
That's right. And they're in power. And how do you get to be in the special club?
I need to powder your wig and do something else. I don't know.
You got to powder something. Start something.
Start your oath.
We're going to take our required theory classes on classical art theory. What's in the back corner here?
It's an écorché figure.
Écorché. What's an écorché figure, Anne?
It's a figure that's flayed of its skin so that you only see the muscles.
The muscles, where, that comes from mouse, right?
No.
Muscle. It's where when you flex a muscle, it's like a little mouse that runs up and down.
Ew.
Exactly. Isn't that awesome? That's what happens when you have a sister who was a French linguist. The muscles, everything can be seen on the écorché. So first you study the plaster cast, the things that don't move. Second, you learn all of the rules of how art theory goes together. Third, you learn the écorché so you understand the muscles of the human body, points of insertion, points of origin, how things flex and move, because you can see the lats, you can see all of the muscles. In my life drawing class, this was really a useful lesson. We had to memorize the muscles and all of their names and everything. One week we had...
Which school?
St. Olaf College in Northfield, Minnesota.
Undergrad. Okay.
It was undergrad.
Okay.
Although they did not let the male model go without a modesty thong.
Because he had an erection all the time?
No, because he had a cock. But the girl could be there with her fur burger there and no modesty garment.
Oh my God, you had to draw a fur burger?
Well, yeah.
Oh,
it's
that's
like,
so good.
dude, I was in one class where at Towson, where the girl was there and she had 5 labia piercings, ding, 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 on her fur burger. And the light was like, shing, and the like, twinkle, twinkle. I'm like, this is not right.
Oh, no. Oh.
So at St. Olaf College, the guys got covering over a modesty garment.
Modesty?
But the girls didn't get one.
Well,
Didn't, air quotes, need one, which I still
this
think.
is the beginning of subjectifying women, right?
Just you wait.
This is like the beginning of legit, like, sanctioned.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
So,
Go ahead.
you draw the écorché and you learn where all the muscles, the musculars go. Finally, you would work from the live model, which is what you're seeing in this particular image by Zoffany. But I have an interesting little drawing here because you would actually be able to sketch from the live model. In this case, it was a female model, blah, blah, blah. But you would have to correct nature according to the higher conception of the human form. This goes back to the concept of the classical art theory.
What?
Meaning, if it were Rubens, you would have corrected away that cellulite.
Yeah.
You would have made this to be a perfect drawing of a woman who has smooth,
nice curves,
lithe curves that could have been carved and satiny in marble. But a female human being, of course, we all know, has no irregularities on any surface. And this happened to me in a life drawing class at St. Olaf College, where I was drawing away, and the instructor will come along and he'll correct what you're doing. It's like that. You've got that angle a little bit wrong.
What?
Oh yeah.
The male teachers are coming through and saying, "Make that a better looking woman."
Well, no,
basically.
they're correcting your line. But in my case, I was drawing what I thought looked pretty much like her and looked great. But I was working on, and I use this. I tell my students this all the time: 18 by 24 pad. Draw. But what I'm doing is I'm drawing something that was maybe, 14 inches tall.
Oh, inside the...
Right? Mm-hmm. My instructor came by and said, "Here, let me borrow your eraser." And he went, what? And he erased the entire drawing, which I was kind of proud of. And he went, "Here." And he put the marks on the outer edges. It needs to fill this much space. Boy. Which was a really humbling, but also incredibly important lesson. Challenge. Because you have to, don't just make whatever size is comfortable to your little hand. Figure out how to fill the space, right? Yep. And get the angle right. And honestly, Anne, I've played this game. I don't know if you ever, the best drawings in my drawing 1 classes, drawing 1 and drawing 2, I'd have the live model come in and I do we're going to do a Franken drawing. Meaning, all right, and you got students that are from 5 foot nothing to like 6'3", right? Everybody's standing on an easel, and you know how I tell them they have to stand, and their crayon's supposed to be at the end of their arm, which is at a certain height. Boom, eye level. Well, you draw for 5 minutes. Everybody move 1 easel to the left. Correct what you see to what's on the model's still on the stand. Everybody move 1 more time. 5, 5, 5, 5, 5.
You get a cubist drawing?
You can, but you can also sometimes get a really amazingly correct drawing because all of these eyes have corrected or you find the mean of what is the proper angle of vision.
I see.
For how far out is that hip? Where is that foot?
Question.
You there in the front row.
Okay. If I'm standing at an easel, my arm straight out, am I taking my drawing to the next one, or are we're shifting to somebody else's drawing?
Somebody else's drawing.
Just want to clarify.
Which is also interesting because
that is interesting.
Because some people are using charcoal, some are using pencil, some are using whatever, and so you end up seeing this. It's beautiful.
Yeah, it's interesting
because sometimes they're like, "Whoa!" And I say, "Yes, see, this is where I wish I could take all of you folks in this class and go." and push you into one big ball, and you'd be turbo artist, because we would take all the best of all of you, and you would get the truth of what is being seen there. At the same time, if you're 6'3" and the person that was on the easel is 5 nothing, you need to kneel, squat, flex your knees. You need to stand on your toes, because what's the truth? And what that also forces them to see is that everything changes. And your point of view changes. And whatever you remembered from that easel, that doesn't apply anymore. It's different here, it's different there. And hopefully, if you've done it enough, they're halfway around the room and they're looking at a completely different side of the model.
Yeah.
So
it's not an average, though.
No, it's not. It's interesting because some drawings are just fated to be. Some students are graphic designers or photographers. And they go, I don't need to take drawing. And there are other people that want to know how to draw.
Well, this brings up the question, what is the important, I mean, it's the basis of everything, right? Mm-hmm. Like understanding form and space.
Yep.
And the crochet. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's the foundation of all of it. What
we at MICA in the glory days would call drawing is the spine of the school. Aha. Because in its glory day, everyone had to take drawing 1 and drawing 2 their first year. I don't care if your major is basket weaving, auto mechanics, it does not matter. Drawing, and I tell my students, if you know how to draw this figure and you can get them into space, you'll be able to park your car better. You'll be able to parallel park because your sense of space will help you navigate your way in the world. In the same way, they would have to take life drawing because you're a human being and we need to look at ourselves, and all this body positivity now means that you should be able to draw anybody with truth and care and compassion, as opposed to I can draw digitally and I can make it go where I can use a photo reference and it's okay. That's lazy. That's lazy. If you think about drawing, in this case, much the same way as Ang would say, drawing is the probity of art. It's the truth of art.
Ang said that?
Ang said drawing is the probity of art. And he said that to Degas.
What?
Yeah.
They knew each other?
Yeah.
What?
Hey. Ang didn't die until what, 1867?
Is that right?
Yeah.
Like, you don't think of those guys mixing.
Oh, yeah, I know. Because Degas' drawings, look at him. You look at how he looks and navigates those dancers' legs.
Yeah.
He is looking for the truth. And he moves them because he's looking for the truth.
Right.
So the concept of the academic method, the rules, was that once you've mastered all of those, you would continue to the next level. Now, you're just studying at the Royal Academy. You're not an academician yet. You're just learning the rules from all of those boys in that painting, right? But the next step was that when you learned how to paint, we're just going to talk about painting for now, and we all know that printmaking follows painting. And the other cool, exciting thing, I just love this about printmaking, is that here I have the hierarchy of academic subjects. And I know I may have mentioned this before. They may have not listened to that episode. However, in this case, and this was the fact in basically the French Academy, the English Academy, and American Academies.
I don't know who decided this, but...
Well, actually, there are things that make perfect sense. When you think about, okay, what's the highest rank there, Miss Ann? What's the highest rank?
History painting.
And what is the most important kind of history painting?
Biblical.
Why?
Moralizing, I assume.
It's Christian. We're all Christians. We're white Christians. It's England. It's France. It's Italy. We're Christians. We are not heathens. We're not others. Biblical. People understood and read their Bibles. They knew those stories, and those stories were actually parables that taught lessons, that had many things that could be useful. The next step down from that was what?
Myths.
What kind of myths?
Usually Greek and Roman.
Not usually, always. Greek and Romans.
Sorry.
So let's just say that Aphrodite for the Greeks was now Venus for us. Let's just say that Zeus for you is now
Jupiter
for us. And we can go all the way down the line. Let's just say that Athena, goddess of righteous war, arts, knowledge, is in Roman.
Minerva.
Basically, the Romans went, ooh, we like all that stuff. We're going to give it our own names. Like, we like all those forms. We're just going to put a fig leaf on it.
Well, I feel like there is a structure of comportment in humanity. Mm-hmm. There are, man against nature, man against man. Like there's only so many things that need to have labels and people that represent them. Mm-hmm. War, passion, whatever. So it makes total sense that they would just say, oh, they've got a structure. Let's just take it and go.
And let's give it our names.
And the Christians do the same thing.
Because Zeus, Jupiter, God, Caesar, Kaiser.
Somehow in my childish mind, the gods, the Greek gods and the Roman gods were not
the same.
Malevolent power. But they are.
You know what's cool is that the Greeks and the Romans understood that they were fickle, snotty little bitches, and sometimes they did stupid stuff. Biblical, obviously, that's the highest form because Christianity is better than all those heathen things, those pantheistic things with too many gods, mythologic, and then what's the thing below the Bible and mythology?
Things that are happening now.
Yeah, real life.
Actual events.
But actual events can learn things from those other things, if you think
there's only so many things that happen.
Well, because we're stupid and we keep repeating the same
Exactly.
bullshit. But history painting is the highest kind of art form for several reasons. Because in a history painting, it usually involves more than one figure. It involves many figures, and you have to deploy it in such a way that you're teaching a lesson. It embodies so many harder lessons for the artist to carry forward. All right?
Well, yeah, it demands that you know how to set a scene.
You're a stage director, you're a film director, you understand how to pose the humans, how to do light and shadow, who's got the spotlight, where are you going to scaffold this, where are your diagonals, all of those. Next layer down, what is it?
Portraits.
Well, that's a big snooze. But if you think about let's talk Enlightenment. You're talking about the cult of the genius. You're talking about the great people who contribute ideas. So portraits of whom? Who's the highest level?
Royalty, because they're the patrons and the badasses.
Correct. You're right. The people in power. Next would be historical figures. And those could be Alexander the Great. They could be Charlemagne. They could be
Socrates.
Absolutely. So historical figures, because you think about the death of Socrates.
Sure.
Great history painting, but you could be just doing single portraits. And then, of course, the lowest grade of portrait would be?
Well, you, me, and everybody else, the common people.
But let's just go ahead and put all those British grand manner portraits. They all wanted to aspire. It was be Lady Burnley as the goddess such and such. They were aspiring to be a higher level.
Or they were seen on their property so that you knew they were landed.
Correct.
Yeah.
So portraiture, who do you show them as themselves? Okay, so you have the grand manner and who you are and how you're dressed and who you're going to aspire to be. Or in a later part of the century, there was this lovely thing. There was a surge towards naturalism in portraiture. And and I'll actually show you this in another spot where we're showing Winkelmann. In one, he's just this guy who's kind of writing his thoughts down at a desk. And in another, he's wearing a turban and he's wearing a furry cape and he's looking at prints and he's thinking about how he will write his great book. Portraiture, there's so many layers of stuff. Think about Donald Trump's portrait as he would have himself portrayed in the National Portrait Gallery as 45 versus Donald Trump, how he chose to present himself for his mugshot when he went into the prison. And everybody is using that as a way of saying, look at him being X. A portrait is everything, right? Mm-hmm. What's below history painting and portraits?
Landscapes.
Which I think is interesting because landscape is, if you were Poussin, if you were Claude, it was a backdrop for the Queen of Sheba, for Roman peasants. Blah, blah, blah. Landscape was what's below that.
I'm amazed because I feel like the last three are interchangeable.
But wait, they're not.
Right.
Because still life, think of the lessons that can be taught in a still life.
But think about the lessons in a landscape. It can be, as Turner would say, nature as God.
Nature is God. That's Turner in 1830, 40, 50, right? Rain, speed, and steam.
Right. Fighting Temeraire.
That's in the 1840s.
Right, later.
We're talking 18th century.
Right.
And Turner has, and they're all like, what the hell happened to you? You could do clouds perfectly. You could do, remember his Liber Studiorum? And he's saying, here's Egypt, and it's the plague of this and that, and it's all very clearly represented. And then he's like, that, I've strapped myself to the mast of a ship.
Oh, that's an apocryphal story.
I've stuck my head out the window of a train going faster than any human has on the face of the planet.
Okay, fine.
But landscape.
Okay.
Because landscapes had plenty of lessons to teach as well. Below that is?
Still life.
Yeah, many of us would go, really?
Yawn.
Yeah,
But
memento mori. Let's think about, oh God, Poussin would have hated any Dutch still life.
But they're glorious.
Oh my God, they're photorealistic, right?
Yes.
They've got roamers and they've got the oyster. It's just like, hey,
fly on the
what else? And they got the and the fleeting time and the memento. Remember, you will die. And the uninterrupted meal and
the orange peel
and all of that. You have all the senses: the sight, sound, smell, taste, touch. There's lessons in his still life. And then, okay, what's the last one?
Genre.
What is genre?
In the case of art history and the hierarchy of academic subjects, genre indicates scenes from daily life.
Daily life of...
Meaning work.
Like, okay, so that's a picture of me hitting the keyboard really hard in my office today, going, motherfucker.
Us talking into a microphone.
Well, I don't know. This seems kind of extraordinary to me. But us drinking coffee in the morning, us going out, changing the cat litter. That
things of no import.
Absolutely zero important, and that wouldn't become a thing. It wouldn't be made important until Courbet, until
Wait. Wait, we get genre in Rembrandt, don't we?
The Academy hated Rembrandt. They were middle class people outside the thing.
Yeah, but he did it. He should get some credit.
He'll get. Don't worry, because Rembrandt has this huge. Blooming in the 18th century.
Yes, resurgence.
Yeah. But the Academy, let's just say that the Academy was a conservative organization that rose through the system in much the same way one might have a cotillion. What is the thing where you come, not a quinceañera, what's the thing for white women when they come out?
The debut.
A debut. They have their...
They're a debutante.
They're a debut. This is the debutante, the proper way you go through the system.
Gotcha.
You know, honestly, first time I'd ever heard of a quinceañera, I think it was 2015.
Oh.
I grew up in Iowa. We don't have quinceañeras in Iowa.
Right.
But there was somebody from Miami. I'm like, oh, cool.
Interesting.
I mean, yeah.
It feels young to me. 15 feels young. 14.
Bar mitzvahs.
Yes. Also feels young.
I had never heard of a bat mitzvah till I moved to Baltimore.
Me neither.
But what's a bat mitzvah?
With the women.
Quinceañera, sweet 16. But it's that, how do you rise through it? What is the appropriate way? None of the people in those genre paintings would be having cotillions.
No.
They would be the people...
Genre indicates lower class.
Peasants.
Yes.
And that's not really worthy of... However, one thing that's cool about genre is that it does come around because... mothers teaching their children how to be good citizens, how to say prayer before a meal.
Oh,
Hogarth, Chardin, and Greuze, and those kinds of the lower classes teaching how to give the bride away to her lovely young man who loves her, and the father is blessing the marriage. That's the sitcom of its day, if you think about it.
Yes.
Because
but it's also everyone can relate to that.
Not everyone. Real people like you and me. But not the people that want to be in the portraits or the history paintings.
Well, this is like the chasm between haves and have-nots is as wide as it is here now.
Yes.
Yeah.
So this hierarchy is, again, a systematic way of laying things out, I think, so that people understand in a respect who we are, whose we are, how we're going to value things. In much the same way when I show you Denis Diderot's Encyclopédie and they talk about, oh, it's so beautiful. They lay out the concept of all the knowledge forms. And like, this is theology, this is where this goes. And coming up with a system, that's an Enlightenment concept. How do we put, yes, you there in the front row.
Is this when the organization of libraries starts?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
The Enlightenment to me has always been, how do we codify human knowledge? How do we gain more knowledge? How do we fit it into some structure? Like, to me, it's always been about librarians.
It's about the keepers of knowledge.
Right.
It's about the people who figure out what we have and how we make it presentable to more people.
And what else is out there?
And the Enlightenment says, you know, there's this. What matters?
Well, I guess that's the question. Does it matter if we live in Baltimore, Maryland? Does it matter to us that we know what happens in India or Laos or Japan or Afghanistan? Like, does it?
It does if the temperature goes up more than 1.5 degrees.
Well, that's just it. So we have decided, and I agree, that we are a global community.
Which was never a thing before, because Laos and meh were all so not us.
Right. And in the end, we all have to.
We better get our shit together, because we
have to cooperate and not fight.
But that was not a notion.
It was not a notion.
Because they were still discovering worlds. There was still terra incognita.
Right.
But that's just it. You know, if you put your Galileo and your Copernicus, and it's like those are new ideas. They're scary.
But those new ideas come so much earlier, and it's not until the 1700s, the 18th century, that people start to try and gather it all in one.
But what's so exciting is because they have the information.
Right.
And here's the question. Why do they have the information? I'm going to jump ahead a moment, and I'm going to think about some of the larger topics. Admittedly, this is a punch list that I throw out for my students to get them thinking about what the 18th century is. People who have a cell phone attached to the end of their arm have the world at their command. My students, why do I have to memorize that? I can look on my phone. So you don't need to know Masaccio, Holy Trinity, 1428, Santa Maria Novella. You don't need to know that. Okay, well then, when was perspective discovered? Well, we could say it was way back in ancient Rome, but who codified it? Brunelleschi, decade or two before. So when this guy figures out how to use it and make the entire wall of a cathedral disappear, that's a big deal. Well, I can just see on my phone. But when you're the Enlightenment and you say, you know what, the church has told us all this time, this is what will happen, you have to know this, and you don't have agency because you trust in a higher power. And that's the whole fabric of your universe. And you better believe that was the fabric of your universe. That's all there was. The church. It's like, you're a flesh puppet.
They're the authority.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, who has the money? Who has the power? Who has the pretty stuff?
Well, but they're kings and
they still use the church as
a
tool. Right. Or remember, divine right of kings. How did they get their power? From God.
Right.
And God runs the church.
Right.
And I'm Henry VIII. I can change the church so that I can get a gosh darn divorce.
Oy.
Well, if we think about the Enlightenment, and when they start saying, you know, there's this new thing we're using called science, which I will admit that some folks today are still having a hard time believing. There's this thing called science, and that what you can see, touch, taste, smell, measure, test, retest, have a hypothesis, retest, recreate to prove this is a fact, that's a new thing. The power of deciding, I can make those decisions for myself. God gave me a brain. Actually, I have a brain. I can use it. That's mine. Your ability to question everything, including the existence of
God.
Did he set this machine in motion?
Who wrote that Bible anyway?
Right. And did God really do this? Or, is it a lovely twittering, clickering, clattering machine that works? In some of my lectures, I'll put optimism, because there was this, oh, wait, anything's possible. And then oftentimes in another lecture, hey, wait, we could put on a show in our own yard, in our barn, and we could have anybody in it we want. Why? Because we have agency. We can make our own choices, right? We could decide what is worthy of being shown. Do we want to have Francis Gum, a.k.a. Judy Garland, and Mickey Rooney do a thing, or do we want to do whatever we want?
Well, it's like social media where we are the content creators.
Yes, we're the curators.
It's the same idea.
You can curate your own.
We don't have to watch IBM's website go by. We can generate our own stuff that we want to watch.
So it's like, hey, I want to see this. So the concept of the optimism of what anything could be possible. And you question everything. You question the existence of God. Hey, if that big scary guy isn't going to smite me dead, but there are these scientific ideas that if this, then that, then such and such and such, then you start realizing, if I know more, I can do more, then I can be educated more. The perfectibility of human beings, of men and women, of human beings. You can make yourself better. You could make yourself better. It wasn't just God wafted his arm and said, you must live in...
You decide.
Yeah. Agency, freedom. Who was it? Rousseau, Jean-Jacques. Everyone lives in the world in chains, but yearns for freedom of speech, freedom of this, freedom of that. It's like, oh, I can be what? If you have a voice, you can change things. That's agency.
Well, you get to control your own destiny.
Oh, you just said, you can control your own destiny. Okay, yeah, sure, fine.
Well, that's because I was growing up with the privilege of being in the democratic United States of America.
Correct.
Where our basis of understanding is that
I love the fact that you wallow in your privilege and you know that you have it. And I do too.
I absolutely have.
You of all people, I know.
Privilege oozing out everywhere.
And here's the thing, because I grew up as a dopey kid in Iowa, and yet I have privilege out the yin-yang. And we're so lucky. Okay, optimism, perfectibility to minute. Here's the thing.
We're back on our list. Sorry, people.
We're back on our list. But the idea of, when I was growing up, we were bright trash. We had no money. When I was growing up, 5 kids.
But you were all smart.
Because what's the thing I have underlined in italics and bold?
Education equals progress.
Education. Knowledge is power.
Right.
You learn, you know, you can do things.
Well, when somebody tries to thwart you, you know what the rules of government are, you know what the rules of society are, you know how to get around it, you know how to maneuver, you know all that stuff.
That gives you power. Knowledge is power. Now, the idea of education for everyone, well, certainly for white men, and then eventually, we might let some...
And other people's.
Some stuff happen.
Right.
And then the next one, and it is true.
It's such a story of hope and despair. All of it. All
Absolutely.
At once.
Yes, and I'm telling you, that's why this was like a really hard... So what's the next thing I have?
Improve society, reform institutions.
All right, so America.
Yay.
All right, we don't want to live under persecution. We don't want your stupid taxes. We're going to be our own selves. We're going to free ourselves. We're going to create a more perfect union. We're going to create a place where everyone has a voice, at least if you're a white man. And someday, maybe you'll have a 3/5 of a vote. Maybe if you're lucky, until 1965, and then maybe you can vote. Maybe. But the idea of the reform that did happen, and the thing that excites me is the fact that the United States beat France to the revolution. The thing that happens...
That is true. Oh, I never thought of it that way.
God!
It's incredible.
We beat them.
Yeah, we did.
By ages.
Yeah, a long time.
Yeah,
1789.
Yeah. Right, 1776, we're like, And then we come up with our Constitution, 1783. And then French were like, hey, that's kind of cool. And then, hey...
Interesting.
We beat them.
Even though they're like the most...
And yet, who got rid of slavery first?
Yeah,
who beat us? Not us. And England got rid of it way before 30 something, 37, I don't know.
The thing that makes me so cringy now as an adult person is that when we were growing up, we were not taught any of this bad crap.
Of course not.
That we were taught that the United States was the best way to be, the best way to govern, the best system, the best.
On paper, it is.
It is in theory, but we have never acted that way.
Not never.
Really.
Mostly.
Ever actually gotten there? Like, there's always I'm like, what? What do you mean we did what? And why am I only learning this when I'm 55?
God, you're only 55.
Well, not now, but what, like,
Yeah.
When we first read Caste, or when we first read, Lynching on the Lawn, or whatever that.
Oh, you mean the one I read to you all the way when you did the Civil Rights Triangle?
Right.
And that was shocking, right?
It was shocking, and I feel crappy that it was shocking.
And today I was reading something I'm like, I've always adored that image because it's so powerful and so important. And then I realized, you did that how?
Yeah.
But it was, but a picture's worth 1,000 words.
The power of images. All right, let's get back to the power of images.
So, the power of images is, after you improve society and reform institution, what's the next one?
Develop the taste of a growing middle class.
A new thing called a middle class. Not just serfs, not just people that are shoveling your shit, not just the richy riches. This new thing called the middle class, which is America, which is parts of England, which is the academy realizing that art is something that can help you learn. Let's say that you don't have time to read your Rousseau, your Diderot, your all of those Enlightenment thinkers, but you can see a painting that says, I will live and die for my country because I believe in what we stand for.
Sure. Yeah.
You can do that.
Right.
And art can do that. Developing the taste of the growing middle classes. That means when we talk about Hogarth, that's moral genre painting.
Sure.
That's Chardin. That's Hogarth. That's Angelica Kaufman. It's how do we train our children? Because women, their job was to be able to bring that, stay home, do that, and nurture these people to become better citizens. That's their job. Art can teach them that.
But how much access to these images are Joe Q. public getting at this point?
What a great question. And that's called the salon.
And are we in journals yet? Are we in?
Journals really kick in high gear in the 19th century.
Right.
But the beauty of it is, as I will show you in subsequent chapters of this episode.
Because we're going to keep going. But can the person who shines your shoes walk into the salon?
In theory, I believe they could. I believe because it was a public exhibition that you could go. David didn't paint the Oath of the Horatii for just himself and a couple friends, or maybe just himself and a couple people that were liberal, rich people that weren't quite with him. He said, I am a citizen. I will live and die for what I believe is right, a republican or a self-governing rule of law. The concept of don't have to be the herd mentality. When we talk about Hogarth and we see his images of what the polling can be or who comes to vote, those are all really amazing new ideas. And we'll also see the perversion of it in some Hogarth. He'll make fun of it, which is no different than now. But at least you're aware.
Right.
It's hard, but it's fascinating.
It is hard.
Because here's the thing that's so cool about prints, is that a painting, as you'll see when we talk about the salon, is one image on a wall in a venue, and then it goes away. It may become a part of the Louvre. It might go into somebody's house. Who knows? But print is a genie of a bottle because there's more than one. And if you have a print of what was shown at the salon in 1785, that's a postcard. That's a poster. You went to a rock concert. You saw a thing. You got the print of this thing. And like, I went to see that. And I saw that one. And this painting, and look at this. I saw this painting. It was so amazing. And I thought about, because the print defies any of those stupid categories we just talked about. That's what's so exciting about prints. They don't have to be just history paintings or landscapes or this or that. They can show people experiencing things. They can show people working. They can show people bisected as in an anatomical, structure. Prints, they defy. That's the beautiful part of them, is that they really go, and they really function outside of that normal category of what the salon says is okay art, because it really is the people's art.
it's still functioning outside of,
Oh, yeah.
and I don't know that it will ever get its,
Hopefully not.
I know, it's, you want it, but you don't.
Yeah.
Ugh.
Like, there's a whole body of work that I want to make. I want to do the story of creation in scientific order with the poetry of Genesis. Is that possible? I don't know. And
Of course it is.
Well, I'm going to try.
You've been talking about it for a long time.
I know. And
You should do it.
so, as we get down our list, science, facts that can be proven, power of reason. I have a mind. I can use it. I can think. I can make my own decisions. Wait, I don't have to be handed by the church or by the aristocracy. I could learn to read. I could learn these things that are in books that I might have access to. Anything's possible. You have agency. You can become yourself. The perfectibility. Like, perfectibility sounds really pretty, but just, I remember my mom talking about looking at her. She said, my children have all outdone me. I went, what do you mean? She said, you're all so committed to this relentless self-improvement. And I was blown away. My mom was a brilliant woman.
Right.
And she said her children had all outdone her.
Wow.
Relentless. But that's the Enlightenment, that you could improve yourself.
Sure.
You've got a brain. You can use it. You don't just have to take what's handed to you. And then the idea that knowledge is power, education is progress, that if I look at my students now and the ones that go down and campaign, they're in marches and they do stuff. My God, that's thrilling. I look at them at the end of I think, our future is in your hands. We f***ed it up and you have to save us now. Thank you. And my job was to show you how stupid we've been and how much energy and power you have. That's what you hand off to the next generation. And then the middle class, well, that's teaching. That's, this whole new group of people that are allowed to think. They're not peasants. And that concept of nationalism is also new because if you think about serfdom, if you think about monarchies, but if you think about nationalism, you think about that new weird democratic thing that the United States started.
Have we just drawn modern country borders at this point?
We're starting to.
Yeah.
Because the Enlightenment really is the birth of the modern world and the modern mode of thinking. That's where this is coming from. Is that, yes, we start getting nation states and we start getting these kinds of, it's not just...
If you're from the Duchy of Burgundy, you're French suddenly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But if you're Flemish, Belgian.
Well,
But you're not Dutch, but you're not...
And Flanders isn't really a country.
No.
It's weird.
But
that part is weird.
But it becomes what becomes Belgium.
Sure.
Because they're Catholic and Holland,
but
Dutch.
North Belgium and Southern Belgium are different.
Good, because we have the ability to look at anything through a computer screen and watch the dazzling movement of lines, blah, 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 blah.
So artificial, Jesus.
It's all garbage.
It is garbage.
Well, come on, North Carolina, South Carolina, come on, Virginia, West Virginia, come on. What's that?
North Dakota, South Dakota.
Well, that's just a line. I mean, come on. I'm from Iowa. We all know Iowa is the only one in the entire union that has a west side, a west coast, and an east coast.
Is that right?
Yeah, we're the only state in the union that has bordered by two rivers.
Is that right?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. But anyway, nationalism, this idea of who we are, whose we are. If you start thinking about the Germanies, and you think about, even if you start thinking about how Friedrich, as an early romantic, is drawing on the Germanic tradition of the great cathedrals, and that he thinks that landscape is spilled religion, that is our heritage. That's nationalism. If you think about Verdi and you think of the Risorgimento, that's nationalism. If you think about America, that's nationalism. It's an artificial creation, but it's who we are right now. Right now, the United States is too many nationals. We don't know. We're in a civil war.
Yes.
And we don't know who we are. And I can tell you where I won't be. I don't want to move to Canada, and it's too scary to move to Mexico. I can't afford to move to Europe. So I guess I better make it work here. Well, the last part of the Enlightenment was really about practicality and restraint. That's the United States. How do we make it work? What don't you need? You don't need to do that. That's extra garbage, you know. Do I need leather seats on my car? No, I don't.
Function, right?
Right.
Right.
It's functional. And you can see it in fashion,
Sure.
which is really beautiful.
I mean, there's so many threads.
Yes.
And
It's popular culture.
yes, and you have to believe we're all better off for knowing more.
Mm-hmm.
And was there a way to do it that wasn't quite so white man? I
Honestly?
don't know if there was.
Honestly, my dad made us go to church. He said, you have to go to church. You need to know the history. You may not believe it, but you have to know the history. Because that way you knew what you could press against. I don't believe that, but it means you have to learn what you do believe. It also meant that he and my mom could be alone at home together for about 3 hours. Sunday morning.
They didn't go with you?
No!
Oh my heck!
No, except
Oh.
for Christmas and
That's
Easter.
hilarious.
But it made perfect sense. So the idea of the Enlightenment giving human beings, white human beings, the keys to the car to drive themselves to their future is what it's like. And what was the thing that I discovered as we were talking about the Enlightenment, and I was talking about all of these new ideas, and this next one is going to be about anatomy and how we understand our own bodies, but it's also what did I say? It was the Enwhitenment.
Yes.
Because all of these lessons were things that white men figured out, and it's awesome for white men.
Right.
And women were still going to be useful. Going to be, and as you'll see in one of the things I'll show you, of the gravid female uterus by William Hunter, who was a brilliant anatomist and taught at the Royal Academy of Arts, was that they're really useful machines, but the female body was a factory to make a thing, and the way it was represented in retrospect by a 21st century writer is that it's a map, and that the doctor is the general on the field commanding the battle, and that it is no different than as it is now. Does the embryo have the power? Does the person who's carrying the embryo have the power? It is still power structures, but that's a slippery slope too, because realizing how we're built, what we can do, what's possible, those all had to be discovered. And we can look back and we can be critical about these guys and be like, yeah, but you did this, yeah, but you did that. Yeah, but they didn't know any better. They didn't know any better. It's still the art that's going to push the way. The Enlightenment, the Endarkenment, the Enwhitenment, those are all the things that we're grappling with here. And I'm not going to lie to you. As I was researching these things and finding out what some of these guys did, I would look at the images and go, oh, that's an amazing discovery. And it's so beautifully rendered, and you put it in a book, and then people could look at it, and then you're like, but wait, you got that, huh? They believed what they were doing was right. The problem is that we need to be enlightened enough to see that light comes from other corners. And that's scary, because that means we have to be open to it.
And that means being open to being wrong.
Oh God, I wallow in my being wrongness. I'm not gonna lie to you. As I was researching the stuff that I wanted to talk to you about today, I said, oh man, oh really? But if it's just an image, it's okay. You know, I mean, if you think about the power of a photograph, the guy takes a picture, it's that fast. But you get an image of something that has never been seen before in a book that comes out in 1774, and like, oh, wow, is that how we're made? Is that what we do? Is that how that works? What a gift. How did you get that image?
Yeah.
Did somebody have to die for that?
Right.
Yeah, they did.
Right.
Isn't all progress going to be at the cost of something? You can't win a battle unless something...
Is that right? There's always an opposition.
For every action, there's an equal and opposite.
You can't move forward without repressing somebody.
If you want to go to college and you don't have any money, what do? You borrow money.
Borrow it.
And then, 41 years later, you pay off your student loans. I know some shit, and I care about a lot, and I love deeply, but I know I'm wrong, and then I find out how much I didn't know, and I get even dumber. I just hope I find out enough that I don't feel too stupid forever. You know what I mean? It's like, I gotta keep reading, and it's all your fault, Ian Schaefer.
What?
Oh, yeah. I could have just avoided reading about the Enlightenment and how it created modern race thinking and why we should confront it. I could have avoided finding out about, oh, this guy died, he was murdered.
What? Who?
Winkelmann.
Winkelmann was murdered?
Yep. And then we talk about Diderot and how everybody thought he was stealing, which is amazing because he also gave us tons of gifts. And then we could talk about, how Albinus put in too many pictures of rhinoceroses with the human body, but hey, it was really pretty and it sold better copies. That's really smart marketing. And then we'll talk about William Hunter and how did he get those images. And then we'll talk about 4-color printing with Etienne
Gautier d'Agouti.
Oh my God. And then the Diderot Encyclopédie, where he makes all of the knowledge of the world available to everyone. But he's accused of plagiarizing. But it is all the knowledge of the world, you assholes. And then you got Winkelmann, who, well...
The first art historian.
Yeah, who... When I read to you
isn't
what...
Vasari the first art historian?
Well, he wrote the biographies of the most eminent family, blah, blah, blah. But it was really Winkelmann who figured out, put things in order.
Right.
And talked, oh, God, it's like how the Greek is the right way to think.
Oh.
Hey, boy from Germany. Okay. But it stuck. And then, like, I have treats. That's all I have to say. But honestly, I feel a whole lot better that we actually talked about the thorny topic of being enlightened. If there was one thing we could do right now in 2024 on the eve of election, how could we be enlightened? Would we tell people they're wrong? Would we try to figure out why they think what they do?
I vote for that one.
And try really hard to understand why they think what they do. And realize that it's not sustainable.
The divisions?
Well, the divisions aren't sustainable. The thinking that
facts aren't facts is not
true.
sustainable.
Alternative facts are that it's acceptable.
It's a social contract. We all have to agree on something.
And we're clearly not doing that.
Right.
When we allow someone who has done what they've done to every caste in American society and belittled men, women, vermin from another country, and says it'll be a bloodbath, that's not a democracy.
No.
That's not enlightened. And the sleep of reason produces monsters. I worry.
We are in it.
We are in the Goya print as we speak.
Yes.
And I hope that somehow we become enlightened enough. And it doesn't matter how old you are. You know, some of the smartest people in the world are over 100. They just aren't on TV. I worry about us.
But the smartest people, are they the ones that are sure of their position, or are they the ones that are open to the possibility that everyone thinks differently?
Those are the reeds that bend with the wind. The oaks, the people who say this is what it is and refuse to bend with the wind and get broken. It is the older ones that know that, and I'm not going to say the truth is elastic.
What's the centrist position?
There is truth on many sides. There are things that are just plain wrong.
Right. Facts would be nice.
And less wrong would be better than patently awful, wrong, belittling, terrible.
Right.
We really are in an Enlightenment moment.
Yeah.
Really, really are. You know, one of the things that's interesting in the Diderot Encyclopédie, it's 17 volumes of text. They actually have an entry on God. And they have entries on different aspects of politics, which could be very thorny and very difficult. But at least they're putting it out there and they're having to put it into words. And somebody has to read it. Here's the problem. How many of us actually read? If we could have that encyclopedia on books on, Audible, we could argue with it when we're on our ellipticals. We could argue with it and say it's wrong. But none of us are going to sit still long enough to read it. We're just going to accept some sort of stupid soundbite that we hear. It's so worrisome.
It is worrisome.
And none of us are without sin, and we're all living in glass houses. Every single one of us.
Sure.
But, I'll close with a happy thought.
Okay.
Somebody had asked.
So, in conclusion,
is anybody right? Is anybody wrong? The thought would be, somebody asked Bishop Desmond Tutu in the midst of some horrible global strife. They said, so are you an optimist? And he said, oh no, I'm not an optimist. I am a prisoner of hope.
Meaning?
Obi-Wan Kenobi, you're our only hope. We have to find our own hope.
Right.
We have to be smart enough to be looking. Sleep of reason produces monsters. You gotta be aware, you gotta be clued in, and nobody's gonna hand you the truth. Being an educated individual, that's your job as a citizen on this planet. I talk to students and some are like, I don't pay attention to the news. And I don't want to say I'm a news junkie, but I do listen to NPR until I go, I can't take it anymore. You gotta be aware, because education, that's progress. What we learn from history is that we fail to learn from history. That's the beauty of it.
Well, that's because not everybody knows the history, right?
Oh, God,
if you ignore history.
Dumber every day.
Right.
When we were talking with Carol Wax, and she's talking about reading the Durand, I'm like, I gotta buy that whole set of books. I just thought, the best gift to myself would be those 11 volumes, and I would just read those. It's like, read the encyclopedia. Whose encyclopedia do you read? I would read Durand. Will Durand? Shit, yeah. Because he's funny, and he's smart, and he puts it all together. And sure, it's, 60 years old. That's okay. When I tell students, you can buy any edition of Gardner's Art Through the Ages. Don't buy the most recent edition. It's $180. Buy the one that's $5 on Amazon, because the pictures won't have changed. The size of the painting won't have changed. Some of the dialogue may have changed a little bit, but basically it's still going to be pretty much the same until we get to
now. Right. All right, everybody, that's where we're going to stop it for this one. Stay tuned for the next episode when we will start talking more thoroughly about Diderot and William Hunter and a bunch of other things, mainly focusing on volumes that put forward the idea of human anatomy, Tru's favorite topic. Thank you to Tru for being our SME as always. I so appreciate your thoughtfulness. And also a thank you to my usual list of people. Dan Fury for being my sound guy, Michael Diamond for being our composer of our theme song, and Skip Barnhart and Lee Turner for being our sound effect guys. So appreciate your help. Let's see. Images are over on the show notes at platemarkpodcast.com. Over there, also sign up for our email list and get notified whenever new episodes come out. You can be the first to know. They go out bright and early on those Tuesdays. And also, think about joining our Facebook group. We're a happy group over there. We're chit-chatting about all sorts of stuff. So come on over. The water's fine, as I like to say. Okay, I think that's it. We'll see you next time.